In the annals of sacred antiquity, the Ark of the Covenant, also revered as the Ark of the Testimony or the Ark of God, is believed to have held a place of unparalleled sanctity among the Israelites. This divine relic, a chest of wood, was sheathed in the purest of gold and crowned with an intricate golden lid known as the mercy seat. The ancient scriptures of the Hebrew Bible, the Book of Exodus, and the First Book of Kings, tell us that this ark served as the divine vessel for the tablets of the law. These were the sacred commandments that God Himself delivered to Moses atop Mount Sinai. Further testament in the Epistle to the Hebrews of the New Testament, along with the Book of Exodus and the Book of Numbers, reveals that the ark also safeguarded Aaron's rod and a pot of manna. The biblical narrative unfolds that roughly a year after the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, the ark was forged according to the divine blueprint that God bestowed upon Moses. This occurred as the Israelites were encamped at the foot of Mount Sinai. From then on, the Levites, bearing the gold-plated acacia chest upon staves, led the people's march, advancing approximately 2,000 cubits ahead of the congregation. It was from between the two cherubim on the ark's cover that God spoke to Moses. In the year 2023, Thomas Romer postulated that the original ark may have contained a statue, a cult image, of you. He further conjectured that the ark might have transported two Betiles, or perhaps two cult image statues symbolizing you and his female companion Asherah, or possibly a lone statue representing you. Nogel and Falk proposed that the ark had its origins in Egypt and was later incorporated into the Exodus narrative. However, the sands of time have yet to yield any archaeological evidence to substantiate these claims. In the sacred annals of the Book of Exodus, it is written that the Almighty Himself bestowed upon Moses the divine blueprint for the ark during his 40-day sojourn upon the celestial heights of Mount Sinai. The divine design was revealed to him, detailing the construction of the tabernacle and the ark's furnishings. The ark was to be crafted from the resilient shittim wood, also known as acacia, destined to be the hallowed vessel for the tablets of stone. Moses, in turn, entrusted Bezalel and Aholiab with the sacred task of bringing the divine design to life. The Book of Exodus meticulously outlines the divine instructions for the ark's construction. It was to measure 2 + 1/2 cubits in length, 1 + 1/2 cubits in breadth, and 1 + 1/2 cubits in height, approximately 131 × 79 × 79 centimeters or 52 × 31 × 31 in, and was to be hewn from acacia wood. Its entirety was to be sheathed in pure gold, with a crown or molding of gold encircling it. 4 golden rings were to be affixed to its 4 corners, 2 on each side, through which staves of shittim wood, overlaid with gold, were to be inserted for the purpose of carrying the ark. These staves were never to be removed. The biblical narrative continues, recounting that after its divine creation by Moses, the ark accompanied the Israelites during their 40 years of wandering in the desert. Whenever the Israelites made camp, the ark was placed in a separate room within a sacred tent, known as the tabernacle. As the Israelites, led by Joshua, journeyed towards the Promised Land, they arrived at the banks of the River Jordan. The ark, carried in the vanguard, signaled their advance. During the crossing, the river ceased its flow as soon as the feet of the priests bearing the ark touched its waters, and remained so until the priests, with the ark, had departed the river after the people had crossed over. As memorials, 12 stones were taken from the Jordan at the place where the priests had stood. During the Battle of Jericho, the ark was borne around the city once a day for 6 days, preceded by the armed men and 7 priests sounding 7 trumpets of ram's horns. On the 7th day, the 7 priests sounding the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark circled the city 7 times, and with a mighty shout, the walls of Jericho crumbled to dust, and the city was taken by the people. After the defeat at Ai, Joshua lamented before the ark. When Joshua read the law to the people between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, they stood on each side of the ark. The ark was then kept at Shiloh after the Israelites completed their conquest of Canaan. We next hear of the ark in Bethel, where it was being cared for by the priest Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron. According to this verse, it was consulted by the people of Israel when they were planning to attack the Benjaminites at the Battle of Gibeah. Later the ark was kept at Shiloh again, where it was cared for by Hophni and Phinehas, two sons of Eli. According to the biblical narrative, a few years later the elders of Israel decided to take the ark onto the battlefield to assist them against the Philistines, having recently been defeated at the Battle of Ebenezer. They were again heavily defeated, with the loss of 30,000 men. The ark was captured by the Philistines and Hophni and Phinehas were killed. The news of its capture was at once taken to Shiloh by a messenger, with his clothes rent, and with earth upon his head. The old priest, Eli, fell dead when he heard it, and his daughter-in-law, bearing a son at the time the news of the ark's capture was received, named him Ichabod, explained as, "The glory has departed Israel," in reference to the loss of the ark. Ichabod's mother died at his birth. The Philistines took the ark to several places in their country, and at each place misfortune befell them. At Ashdod it was placed in the temple of Dagon. The next morning Dagon was found prostrate, bowed down, before it, and on being restored to his place, he was on the following morning again found prostrate and broken. The people of Ashdod were smitten with tumors. A plague of rodents was sent over the land. This may have been the bubonic plague. The affliction of tumors was also visited upon the people of Gath and of Ekron, whither the ark was successively removed. After the ark had been among them for 7 months, the Philistines, on the advice of their diviners, returned it to the Israelites, accompanying its return with an offering consisting of golden images of the tumors and mice wherewith they had been afflicted. The ark was set up in the field of Joshua the Beth-Shemite, and the Beth-Shemites offered sacrifices and burnt offerings. Out of curiosity the men of Beth-Shemesh gazed at the ark, and as a punishment, 70 of them were struck down by the Lord. The Beth-Shemites sent to Kirjath-Jearim, or Baal-Judah, to have the ark removed, and it was taken to the house of Abinadab, whose son Eleazar was sanctified to keep it. Kirjath-Jearim remained the abode of the ark for 20 years. Under Saul, the ark was with the army before he first met the Philistines, but the king was too impatient to consult it before engaging in battle. In 1 Chronicles chapter 13 verse 3, it is stated that the people were not accustomed to consulting the ark in the days of Saul. In the biblical narrative, at the beginning of his reign over the united monarchy, King David removed the ark from Kirjath-Jearim amid great rejoicing. On the way to Zion, Uzzah, one of the drivers of the cart that carried the ark, put out his hand to steady the ark, and was struck dead by God for touching it. The place was subsequently named Perez Uzzah, literally, outburst against Uzzah, as a result. David, in fear, carried the ark aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite, instead of carrying it on to Zion, and it stayed there for 3 months. On hearing that God had blessed Obed-Edom because of the presence of the ark in his house, David had the ark brought to Zion by the Levites, while he himself, girded with a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might, and in the sight of all the public gathered in Jerusalem, a performance which caused him to be scornfully rebuked by his first wife, Saul's daughter Michal. In Zion, David put the ark in the tent he had prepared for it, offered sacrifices, distributed food, and blessed the people and his own household. David used the tent as a personal place of prayer. The Levites were appointed to minister before the ark. David's plan of building a temple for the ark was stopped on the advice of the prophet Nathan. The ark was with the army during the siege of Rabbah, and when David fled from Jerusalem at the time of Absalom's conspiracy, the ark was carried along with him until he ordered Zadok the priest to return it to Jerusalem. In the annals of biblical lore, Abiathar, once a priest, was cast aside by King Solomon for his participation in Adonijah's plot against David. Yet, his life was spared, for he had once been the bearer of the ark. Solomon, in a reverential act, worshipped before the ark following a divine dream where he was promised wisdom. As Solomon's temple took shape, a sacred inner sanctum, known as Kadesh HaKodeshim, was meticulously prepared to receive and safeguard the ark. Upon the temple's consecration, the ark, holding the original tablets of the Ten Commandments, found its rightful place within. As the priests retreated from the holy place after positioning the ark, the temple was enveloped in a cloud, signifying that the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. When Solomon took Pharaoh's daughter as his wife, he arranged for her to reside in a house outside Zion, for Zion was hallowed ground, sanctified by the presence of the ark. King Josiah, too, ensured the ark's return to the temple, from where it seems to have been removed by one of his predecessors. King Hezekiah stands as the last biblical figure to have laid eyes on the ark. Hezekiah is also celebrated for safeguarding Jerusalem against the Assyrian Empire by fortifying the city walls and rerouting the waters of the Gihon spring through a tunnel, now known as Hezekiah's Tunnel, which directed the water within the city walls to the Pool of Siloam. In a non-canonical text, the Treatise of the Vessels, Hezekiah is recognized as one of the kings who concealed the ark and other treasures of Solomon's temple during a period of crisis. This text enumerates the following hiding places, said to have been inscribed on a bronze tablet: a spring named Kol or Kahal with pure water in a valley with a stopped-up gate, a spring named Kutel, a spring named Zedekiah, an unidentified cistern, Mount Carmel, and locations in Babylon. Many scholars attribute to Hezekiah the authorship of all or parts of the Book of Koheleh, particularly the enigmatic epilogue. Intriguingly, the epilogue seems to allude to the ark story with references to almond blossoms, locusts, silver, and gold. The epilogue then cryptically refers to a pitcher broken at a fountain and a wheel broken at a cistern. While scholars disagree on whether the pure spring waters of the Pool of Siloam were used by pilgrims for ritual purification, many concur that a stepped pilgrimage road between the pool and the temple had been constructed in the 1st century CE. This roadway has been partially excavated, but the west side of the Pool of Siloam remains unexcavated. In 587 BC, when the Babylonians laid waste to Jerusalem, an ancient Greek version of the biblical third book of Ezra, 1 Esdras, suggests that the Babylonians seized the vessels of the Ark of God, but makes no mention of the Ark itself. And they took all the holy vessels of the Lord, both great and small, with the vessels of the Ark of God, and the king's treasures, and carried them away into Babylon. In rabbinic literature, the final disposition of the Ark is a matter of dispute. Some rabbis contend that it must have been transported to Babylon, while others argue that it must have been hidden to prevent it from being taken to Babylon and never return. A late 2nd century rabbinic work, the Tosefta, records the opinions of these rabbis that Josiah, the king of Judah, secreted away the ark, along with a jar of manna, a jar containing the holy anointing oil, the rod of Aaron which budded, and a chest given to Israel by the Philistines. The Kohathites, one of the Levite houses from the Book of Numbers, were entrusted with the care of the most holy things in the tabernacle. When the camp, then wandering the wilderness, set out, the Kohathites would enter the tabernacle with Aaron and cover the ark with the screening curtain, and then they shall put on it a covering of fine leather, and spread over that a cloth olive blue, and shall put its poles in place. The ark was one of the items of the tent of meeting that the Kohathites were responsible for carrying. Samaritan tradition asserts that until the schism between Samaritanism and Judaism, which arose when the priest Eli stole the Ark of the Covenant and established a rival cult at Shiloh, the Ark of the Covenant had been kept at the sanctuary of Yhwh on Mount Gerizim. Archaeological evidence reveals strong cultic activity at Kiriath Jearim in the 8th and 7th centuries BC, long after the Ark was supposedly removed from there to Jerusalem. Notably, archaeologists discovered a large elevated podium, associated with the northern kingdom and not the southern kingdom, which may have been a shrine. Thomas Romer suggests that this may indicate that the Ark was not moved to Jerusalem until much later, possibly during the reign of King Josiah. He notes that this might explain why the Ark featured prominently in the history before Solomon, but not after. Additionally, 2 Chronicles chapter 35 verse 3 indicates that it was moved during King Josiah's reign. However, Yigal Levin argues that there is no evidence that Kiriath Jearim was a cultic center in the monarchical era or that it ever housed any temple of the Ark. 52-57. Some scholars believe the story of the Ark was written independently around the 8th century BC in a text referred to as the Ark narrative, and then incorporated into the main biblical narrative just before the Babylonian exile. Romer also suggests that the Ark may have originally carried sacred stones, of the kind found in the chests of pre-Islamic Bedouin, and speculates that these may have been either a statue of Yahweh or a pair of statues depicting both Yahweh and his companion goddess Asherah. In contrast, Scott Nogle has argued that the parallels between the Ark and these practices remain unconvincing, in part because the Bedouin objects lack the Ark's distinctive structure, function, and mode of transportation. Specifically, unlike the Ark, the Bedouin chests contained no box, no lid, and no poles. They did not serve as the throne or footstool of a god. They were not overlaid with gold, did not have cherubim figures upon them. There were no restrictions on who could touch them, and they were transported on horses or camels. Nogle suggests that the ancient Egyptian bark is a more plausible model for the Israelite Ark, since Egyptian barks had all the features just mentioned. Nogle adds that the Egyptians also were known to place written covenants beneath the feet of statues, proving a further parallel to the placement of the covenantal tablets inside the Ark. The Ark is first mentioned in the book of Exodus and then numerous times in Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Psalms, and Jeremiah. In the annals of time, the Ark of the Covenant stands as a beacon of divine power and mystery. Its first mention is found in the sacred book of Exodus, and its presence echoes through the scriptures of Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Psalms, and Jeremiah. In the book of Jeremiah, the prophet, speaking in the days of Josiah, foretells a future epoch, possibly the twilight of existence, when the Ark will cease to be the subject of discourse or utility. And it shall come to pass, when you multiply and flourish in the land, in those days, the utterance of the Lord, they will no longer utter, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. It will not come to mind, nor will they remember it, nor will they miss it, nor will it be made any more. Rashi, the esteemed scholar, interprets this verse, stating, "The entire populace will be so suffused with the spirit of sanctity that God's presence will rest upon them collectively, as if the congregation itself was the Ark of the Covenant." In the second book of Maccabees, it is chronicled that the prophet Jeremiah, guided by a divine message, commanded that the tent of meeting and the ark accompany him. He journeyed to the mountain from which Moses beheld God's promised land. Upon reaching the mountain, Jeremiah discovered a cave. Into this cave, he carried the tent, the ark, and the incense altar, subsequently sealing the entrance. Some of his companions attempted to mark the path but failed to locate it. Upon learning of this, Jeremiah admonished them, "The place shall remain unknown until God finally gathers his people together and shows mercy to them. The Lord will bring these things to light again, and the glory of the Lord will appear with the cloud, as it was seen both in the time of Moses and when Solomon prayed that the sanctuary might be worthily consecrated." The mountain from which Moses beheld God's promised land is identified as Mount Nebo, situated in present-day Jordan. In the New Testament, the Ark is mentioned in the letter to the Hebrews and the Revelation to St. John. Hebrews chapter 9 verse 4 reveals that the Ark contained the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Revelation chapter 11 verse 19 narrates that the prophet saw God's temple in heaven opened, and the Ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. In the Gospel of Luke, the author constructs the accounts of the Annunciation and Visitation using 8 points of literary parallelism to compare Mary to the Ark. Theologians such as the Church Fathers and Thomas Aquinas perceive the contents of the Ark as personified by Jesus Christ, the manna as the Holy Eucharist, Aaron's rod as Jesus' eternal priestly authority, and the tablets of the law as the lawgiver himself. Catholic scholars draw a connection between the pregnant, birthing woman of the Apocalypse from Revelation chapter 12 verses 1 to 2, with the Blessed Virgin Mary, whom they identify as the Ark of the New Covenant. Carrying the Savior of mankind within her, she herself became the Holy of Holies. This interpretation was given in the 3rd century by Gregory Thaumaturgus, and in the 4th century by St. Ambrose, St. Ephraim of Syria, and St. Augustine. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that Mary is a metaphorical version of the Ark. Mary, in whom the Lord himself has just made his dwelling, is the daughter of Zion in person, the Ark of the Covenant, the place where the glory of the Lord dwells. She is the dwelling of God with men. Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, is credited with writing about the connections between the Ark and the Virgin Mary. "O noble Virgin, truly you are greater than any other greatness. For who is your equal in greatness, O dwelling place of God the Word? To whom among all creatures shall I compare you, O Virgin? You are greater than them all, O covenant, clothed with purity instead of gold. You are the Ark in which is found the golden vessel containing the true manna, that is, the flesh in which divinity resides." The Ark is referred to in the Quran. Their prophet further told them, "The sign of Saul's kingship is that the Ark will come to you, containing reassurance from your Lord and relics of the family of Moses and the family of Aaron, which will be carried by the angels. Surely in this is a sign for you, if you truly believe." According to Uri Rubin, the Ark of the Covenant has a religious basis in Islam, which gives it special significance. Since its disappearance from the biblical narrative, there have been a number of claims of having discovered or of having possession of the Ark, and several possible places have been suggested for its location. 2 Maccabees 2, 4-10, written around 100 BC, says that the prophet Jeremiah, being warned by God, before the Babylonian invasion, took the Ark, the tabernacle, and the altar of incense, and buried them in a cave, informing those of his followers who wished to find the place that it should remain unknown, until the time that God should gather his people again together, and receive them unto mercy. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church claims to possess the Ark of the Covenant in Aksum. The Ark is kept under guard in a treasury near the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. Replicas of the tablets within the Ark, or tablets, are kept in every Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo church. Each tablet is kept in its own Holy of Holies, each with its own dedication to a particular saint. The most popular of these include Saint Mary, Saint George, and Saint Michael. The Kebra Nagast is often said to have been composed to legitimize the Solomonic dynasty, which ruled the Ethiopian Empire following its establishment in 1270, but this is not the case. It was originally composed in some other language, then translated into Arabic, and translated into Ge'ez in 1321. It narrates how the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I with divine assistance, while a forgery was left in the temple in Jerusalem. Although the Kebra Nagast is the best-known account of this belief, the belief predates the document. Abu al-Makarim, writing in the last quarter of the 12th century, makes one early reference to this belief that they possessed the Ark. The Abyssinians possess also the Ark of the Covenant, he wrote, and, after a description of the object, describes how the liturgy is celebrated upon the Ark 4 times a year: on the Feast of the Great Nativity, on the Feast of the Glorious Baptism, on the Feast of the Holy Resurrection, and on the Feast of the Illuminating Cross. In his controversial 1992 book The Sign and the Seal, British writer Graham Hancock reports on the Ethiopian belief that the Ark spent several years in Egypt before it came to Ethiopia via the Nile River, where it was kept on the islands of Lake Tana for about 400 years and finally taken to Aksum. Archaeologist John Holliday of the University of Toronto called Hancock's theory garbage and hogwash. Edward Ullendorf, a former professor of Ethiopian studies at the University of London, said he wasted a lot of time reading it. In a 1992 interview, Ullendorf says that he personally examined the Ark held within the church in Aksum in 1941 while an officer in the British Army. Describing the Ark there, he says, "They have a wooden box, but it's empty." Middle to late medieval construction, when these were fabricated ad hoc. On the 25th of June 2009, the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia, Abuna Paulos, said he would announce to the world the next day the unveiling of the Ark of the Covenant, which he said had been kept safe and secure in a church in Aksum. The following day, he announced that he would not unveil the Ark after all, but that instead he could attest to its current status. The Lemba people of South Africa and Zimbabwe have claimed that their ancestors carried the Ark south, calling it the Ngoma Lungundu, or Voice of God, eventually hiding it in a deep cave in the Dunga Mountains, their spiritual home. On the 14th of April 2008, in a UK Channel 4 documentary, Tudor Parfit, taking a literalist approach to the biblical story, described his research into this claim. He says that the object described by the Lemba has attributes similar to the Ark. It was of similar size, was carried on poles by priests, was not allowed to touch the ground, was revered as a voice of their God, and was used as a weapon of great power, sweeping enemies aside. In his book The Lost Ark of the Covenant, Parfit also suggests that the Ark was taken to Arabia following the events depicted in the second book of Maccabees, and cites Arabic sources which maintain it was brought in distant times to Yemen. Genetic Y-DNA analyses in the 2000s have established a partially Middle Eastern origin for a portion of the male Lemba population but no specific Jewish connection. Lemba tradition maintains that the Ark spent some time in a place called Senna, which might be Senna in Yemen.